Welcome to the Design Build Institute of America's Design Build Delivers podcast. Each month, we'll be bringing you conversations with design build pros, owners, and successful teams about the best ways to harness the power of design build for your projects. I'm Kim Wright at DBIA National, and today we've got a really great conversation with Geoff Neumayr, who's the Chief Development Officer at San Francisco International Airport, which is in the midst of a massive $7 billion capital program. Design build, and specifically progressive design build, is playing a key role in this diverse array of projects, which are literally transforming SFO. Geoff has some great insights on progressive and how it's become another terrific design build tool for owners. So we're talking to Geoff Neumayr from San Francisco International Airport, who's our Chief Development Officer there, and we want to talk about progressive design build, something that I think everyone in the industry is talking about. There's a very large group of people who know what the value is of progressive, but there's also a large group of our industry who's still trying to figure out what is this. But let's step back a little bit and start talking first about San Francisco and about your background. And then that will set the table so we can start really digging into progressive a little bit. So tell me about what's going on at San Francisco International.
So what is going on at San Francisco is we are currently embarking on a $7 billion capital program that we are 30% of the way through. Within that project, we have a number of major projects, our largest one being the new Terminal 1 complex, which is two contracts that are each worth in the proximity of about $900 million each, or about $1.8 billion for the entire complex. We are upgrading our Terminal 3 West project, which is a $780 million project, building a brand new hotel. That's a $220 million project. So all told, there's a lot of different things going on at the airport, and it's a really exciting time at SFO because it's one of those opportunities that we actually get to rebuild an airport.
I was going to say, you were really almost reinventing the wheel here. And when you do airports, it's soup to nuts. It's a lot of things. It's the vertical, it's the horizontal, it's everything.
It's everything. And we've got a wastewater treatment plant that we're extending our air train. So every type of project type that you can imagine is underway at the airport. So it is really broad-based in terms of from wastewater to transportation to office buildings. Even we're building a new office building as well.
What a challenge!
It's actually just a challenge. It really doesn't feel like a challenge. It feels just incredible excitement of what's going on because it is one of those places in time for the airport that we've been given the gift of design build and permission. And we've gotten to do something entirely different that is actually is not mentally stressful, but physically exhausting, but not mentally stressful. And when you eliminate that process and you start seeking exceptional, instead of just, how am I going to get this done and get through the day, it really, really becomes a lot of fun. And we do pride ourselves on having a lot of fun in what we're doing. And it's paid off. It's really paid off with people really being the best they can be and wanting to come and join us, whether it be from the build side, our owners' reps, our designers, and my own staff. Everybody loves coming and working. It's a fun day. So
that actually kind of begs that question: the chicken or the egg? Are you growing at SFO so successfully because of the options that you're using? Because you guys have a pretty big toolkit. You're using a lot of different things to make it. Are those things playing together? Is that how that happens?
The growth of the airport?
Exactly, the growth of the airport because of the way you do your business.
It's not really, so the growth of the airport is coming no matter what. And so we're trying to meet the demand in a very quick way. We're actually under gate right now. We don't have enough gates at the airport, and so we're trying to catch up. So that's happening anyways. But what there is a limited amount of money to get more done than was expected. And so from that angle, what you're looking at is that it allows us to get everything done faster and quicker and on time with less amount of money, but to meet our demands. So it's kind of the reverse, that it's not leading, but it's helping us meet it that we have to do. Otherwise, we wouldn't be 30% of the way into our program now. We would still be designing and still waiting to put jobs out to bid. And we're walking away with right now with everything already designed and coming out of the ground and rising up from rising up to the sky. So.
Now, I know for a fact, as we've talked about this, you are an early adopter of integrated delivery in a variety of different ways, and SFO is too. I mean, this is not new for you guys. You guys You've been doing this for a long time.
10 years, I'm coming up on 11 years of doing this. Our first project was a secure connector project back in 2007, where we had to build a connector between two of our terminals, one being Terminal 3 and our international terminal. And it wasn't a big project. It was at that time a $16 million budgeted project. And we were given, part of the money was given to us from one of our airline partners who paid for half of it with some constraints and said, you need to get this done in a 12-month period of time. Building any kind of structure like that and designing and constructing in 12 months, whether it be anything, is very challenging. And it became a way that we looked for. We were going to move towards design build, but we looked for a way to not do it necessarily in a lump sum or have to do documents ahead of time, but just go out and procure our design build team based off of a qualification-based selection. Well, lo and behold, to us, what happened is, as we went through that process, they came on board, and we got that job completed, almost 4 weeks early, and we did it almost in 11 months. And it was an incredibly successful project. It was so successful that it led immediately to the $400 million Terminal 2 project, which was a renovation of our old international terminal that was mothballed back in the early 2000s. And we took that project on. We designed and constructed that project in 30 months. And at the time, it was just get the project done. And I think the amazing...
How often is that always the case, right?
Yeah, and what was interesting about it is that it exceeded everybody's expectations. So not only did we get the project done and over with in 32 months, but it set a new standard in aviation, and we didn't even expect it. One of the things that was absolutely amazing is that we were required to only achieve LEED Silver for that as a city requirement. When we actually completed the project and totaled up all the points, because of the collaboration we got and the way everybody worked, we actually had a LEED Gold project, which became the first LEED Gold terminal building in the United States.
Wow, that's a nice little surprise at the end of the project, right?
But it shows you the power of common purpose when people don't even know what they can do when they work together. And so it was nice, and so we began to see this model repeat itself over and over and over, and it's now repeated itself in upwards of 10 different projects already we've completed, and totaling probably close to $3 billion already. And there's been absolutely no litigation, and each and every time our expectations have been exceeded in what we thought was possible. So it shows you the power of what happens when people get along, have fun, collaborate, integrate, and are fair and trust each other. And what has happened with this is that what we've discovered is that when you can create a sense of fairness all the way around, that everything can be talked about. You don't have to wait for things to become problems. People want the issues out on the table, and the hardest part about finding issues is people not telling you about them because of fear of punishment. And now, for the first time, it's an environment where we don't want to let anybody down, so I'm going to bring it up, because it's better to bring it up, because you're going to get tons of help. Nobody's going to beat you down. Everybody's going to try to solve the problem. And so what happens is rather than playing a blame game on everything, it's about how do we become the best we can be. And that's much more important in that support group, and you create that common purpose. And the strategy of progressive design build, and progressive design build creates that environment through a relationship-based contracting strategy that allows people to be the best they can be. So yeah, it's pretty amazing.
That mental shift is hard, though. That's not an easy thing.
It's not. It's very hard because we've been hardened by a lot of things that have impacted our industry over the last 40 years. A lot of us know about the productivity of what's happening and how costs haven't gone, we haven't gotten nearly as productive as other industries, and we've fallen off significantly. And when you start to expose that, what we began to discover is, and we all know this now, that we've tended to be really hard on people and forgot about the problems. And we realized we had to reverse that strategy and say, wait a second, we have to be really good to each other and really hard on problems and get that through and shift that logic around. Because the biggest thing that happens on a project that affects cost is the schedule slipping out. And the biggest thing that affects schedule slipping out is nobody knowing what to do because the problem didn't get solved. So reinventing ourselves and saying we all will solve the problem is a better route to go.
So we're talking about the mental shift and the core basic values of design build. And now we have progressive design build. which is design build, but it's progressive. But what does that really mean? I mean, it's very hard to necessarily know. Even in the industry, there's a lot of talk. What does that really mean? What is progressive design build?
And it's a really great question. It is a progression of design and price. It's literally that. It doesn't mean anything more, anything less. It's exactly that. And the concept is that you select your design build team with a qualification-based selection and maybe some minor cost components, relative to their management cost, their overhead and profit and fee and those types of nature. But they're selected. But in terms of what we're actually going to program and design and build is still yet to be determined. We know we might be building an office building or a terminal building, and there'll be some basic planning requirements of square footage and those things. But those are more the beginnings of like a pre-programming. But the advantage here is that you can bring the team on now rather than give a designer a pre-planned base of design that was created by a separate set of people. They actually now become, the designer and the builder become responsible for the basis of design now, and they create the document. And they get to meet directly with the stakeholders. There's not a translation now that occurs. They're right in there with the stakeholders. And what happens is that they are allowed to co-create and agree to the terms of the contract relative to what they're going to actually implement in terms of scope, what it's going to cost, and how long it's going to take. And then you finalize the commercial terms through a progression of steps. And the progression of steps essentially is that after you complete the pre-construction or the programming phase, you move on to the progression of the next phase, which is design. So then you will award the design phase, and you can start designing. You can start looking at early packages that you might put out to expedite the schedule, for example, site work or investigation work. And we can begin to price that out and get pricing for that and negotiate a progressive pricing, or in this case, a progressive GMP, and lock that down and get that work done. And you can see what's beginning to happen here is that everybody's getting to create and be participatory in their outcomes. Mm-hmm. It's not, I hope, it's, I promise, or I can't, or people will let you know what they can't do. So they're not having to take on things that they feel coerced into, but they can state that. And a good example of how this works is that, let's say that there's a particular scope and we want to put a maximum price to it. Obviously, somebody who has to inherit the risk of putting that particular scope of work in for a price that they commit to, they are going to be a little bit less risk averse. So as an owner, even if we say, yeah, but you can do it for less, that's not so much the pressure you would make. What you would say is, okay, this is what you say we can afford, this 80% of that scope. That's what you're telling me. We think you can get all 100%. Rather than force that issue, what we say is, let's go ahead and price that out with our trades. And let's say that we are right and that the builder was wrong. They clearly will say, great, let's go ahead and do it. But let's say that they are right and we have the scope not being forced into the issue. Well, then we're not asking for something in an unfair way. It's all we can afford. And so we let it go. But this way, we got to let the market play itself out, because it's going to be what it's going to be no matter what we do. But we protect ourselves in a way that both parties are being treated fairly in terms of the risk they're having to accept. And through this process, you get this alignment. And that's the primary difference is with other forms of project delivery that have gone on, is that people don't get to be part of that process of how to align scope, cost, and schedule and what we all agree to contractually. We just sign to a contract and lock down into things that we don't know very much about. And progressive design build, we're able to make sure that everybody gets to really know what they're committing to and signing up for. And general feeling is that what people help create, they will do. What's forced down their throat, or they won't do. Or as soon as there's a problem, they'll blame somebody. Yeah. Because they said, I told you. I know I was right, I told you, and now it's here. And you don't have that going on. So
now are there challenges? What are the challenges to an owner who's thinking about, well, that sounds terrific, right? That sounds wonderful. Are there obstacles that would make that hard for some owners to consider doing?
There's even for us still challenges, and I think it's challenges for any project team on every type of project that ever occurs. And that simply is that there's certain people that want absolute control on things. That's their management style. The idea is more traditional in thinking that we can commoditize things in a way that it's very predictable, and it should be predictable. And the contract says you shall do this, and there's a place and time for that, but there isn't the place for it in a progressive design build model that's an integrated model where people make themselves vulnerable. And the trick there is that as a leader of the organization and myself, is we have to be aware of that and make sure that that cancer doesn't affect the rest of the team, because it's really easy for somebody to become a bully in a place because they can actually gain a lot of power if everybody else has made themselves vulnerable, and it destroys the entire team. And of course, this is where it gets hard as a leader, because now you have to recognize you have to protect the greater good. And it doesn't mean people are bad people. It's just their thought process and the way that they personally believe is the right thing to do. So it's not an issue about being bad. It's just the wrong behavior in this particular way of doing business. And so those are the tough decisions you have to make. Technical competency isn't the most important skill set in this process. The most important skill set is your ability to bring people together to facilitate problem solving and be part of a team.
Those classic leadership skills that benefit traditional design build too. I
Yes.
mean, the ability to create and manage and successful high-performing teams.
Yeah. In fact, almost any deliveries, whether it be design, bid, build, still would come out better in this market. We've been programmed to think that the builder is bad, owner is always right, and designer can do nothing right. And just these misaligned expectations of people that are completely wrong. But we've been programmed to react that way. And there are people that cannot change, but there are people that get it. And you just have to be aware of it. And as I said, it doesn't make anybody bad or good or indifferent. We have a culture in our industry that we're trying to change, as well as implementing design build. We're switching a whole lot of things here at one time.
Are there legislative obstacles to progressive? I mean, there's been I've heard conversations about, I mean, obviously there are states that aren't even doing traditional design build, but you don't even in California have legislation that says you can do progressive design build. That's not the way it works.
No, it doesn't. In fact, even in the city and county of San Francisco, we don't have legislation that will come out and say that. You have to read between the lines. It is understood what we're doing in the process, but it isn't called progressive design build. It's referred to in our administrative code as design build with an alternative procurement process. And it's a different way of selecting, which I mentioned earlier, is a way that we select off of qualifications, not preparing a set of documents where we take a fixed price on. And then it allows us to buy out trade packages. And the episode or the series of steps that got us there was we kind of leveraged the idea that CMGC was already allowed in the administrative code. And we're, for the most part, doing the same thing, except putting the designer in with the builder under one contract instead of having two separate contracts. And of course, understanding that the reason why we like the CMGC model, but it still kept the designer and the builder in two separate camps, that the owner would still get in the middle of it. It's a whole lot better because the builder's there the whole time. So not saying that, but wouldn't it be a whole lot better if the designer and the builder could work without the owner having to interfere with the contracting strategy in the middle of that, and that they could build their relationship, and we could actually address that issue of the conflict between standard of care and spirit and doctrine, and we can close that gap down. And that's what design build, with all forms of design build, does. We just added on the same component of the CMGC, which has now become the progressive design build model that we know today.
That kind of creative innovation, look at what we have and let's see what we can do with it, thinking.
Yeah, I think it's a great thing that we have to do across the country. I'm not as really up to speed with legislation across the entire country. But what was interesting, at least from our experiences, was that there were a lot of things that we could do, and there were a lot of people telling things that we couldn't do, but it didn't say it anywhere. And we just went and looked and said, it says we can do this, and it says we can do this, so why can't we do this? And when you start putting it all together, maybe there's a way there that we can say, hey, we have more flexibility than we think we have. And maybe if we do it under those terms, I think we can get there. And of course, once we have more success on other projects and we get more people championing this, when staying out of litigation, better projects, we'll see design build, all forms of design build just take off. And we're already seeing that happen. And we're really seeing design bid build fall away anyways. And so it just takes time for this all to happen, because again, it goes back to, from our attorneys to people that are in legislative positions within the cities and counties and states, have all been programmed in a way that they've commoditized our business. And it's hard to get, it's not a quick thing to get over. When you try to explain to somebody that doesn't understand design build at all, but they will understand low bid, because that's what you do at the store when you go shopping. So everybody can relate to that, but when you start talking about the fact that it's a team that's got to be built of architects, mechanical engineers, structural engineers, who have to work with trades that involve electricians and mechanics and HVAC and plumbers and welders, that's an entirely different problem now than going to the store and buying a commodity. This is a big team effort where a lot of people have to come together, and it takes a different type of environment to bring hundreds of people together that are very diverse in what their skill set is, but they're all extremely important to make the project a success. And so that as that becomes more apparent and people begin to understand that and see the results, and we get the metrics behind us, I'm absolutely positive that this process will continue to sustain itself in a big way, just like we've seen to date of what's occurred.
I mean, success definitely breeds success. It's very hard to look at some of these really dazzling projects that are happening all over the country, SFO included, and not say, well, what? I mean, look what they're doing. We could be doing that too. I mean, I think it has to open up the conversation at least to say, well, what do we need to do to get there?
Yeah.
And progressive, that is absolutely, there's so much talk about the potential growth of that side of our design build.
And design build just in general, and it might give, and it's not going to be for everybody. It does require a lot of different things to take place. There's some things that can feel a little bit scary at times because not everything is known. You go in, and that makes it not appropriate for everything. There can be politics that play into things where maybe people just got to have more certainty or apparent certainty on things because it's done a certain way, and that's okay. Every project is unique to itself. It has different financing, different people, different laws, different things that apply to it. And we just have to recognize all the variables that come into play. But we do know, no matter what that is, any form of design build is the best way out of it. And I think that's a really important thing to know, that there's no silver bullet in all this. And the best part of all this is that once we set up a design build contract, whether it be fixed fee, negotiated, or the progression that we're talking about here, it still boils down to the people. If the team gets along, it will go great, and amazing things can be done. And so when we realize that you can have a contracting strategy, which is really important to set up the relationships. And I say relationship-based contracting, but the hard work is still on the people. And that's what will make any project successful under design build. And so there's more power into that aspect of things, which is required on all types of project delivery. Design build just allows us to just exploit that.
Absolutely.
That's what it does.
And we're glad to do that.
Yeah,
we get
exactly.
great projects in the end when we do that.
It takes good and makes it really good.
Yeah.
So.
A little extra secret sauce, right?
Yeah.
In DBIA, what we do, we're firm believers in best practices. There's the right way to do things and the wrong way, and you can't call something design build and do it differently and then expect a good outcome. Same with progressive. And so you have been very instrumental in helping us create a primer so that we can define for people what is progressive design build. So we're going to make that available now. It's available to folks on our website. And then we're going to have training too, webinars and education courses. And I guess the hope is that they will, you're a pro, but we're hoping they'll have enough resources where they can get to where they'll feel comfortable at least exploring the option.
Yeah, and getting to understand what it is, and I think, and then also beginning to lay out a new set of skill sets and tools, because it does take a different set of tools than what we traditionally use in our business for managing schedule, cost. Because instead of being sitting back and waiting for everything to come to you, in design build, you're fully engaged in it. And so there's a different way we have to look at things. Our schedule has to be the same schedule our design builder is doing. When we look at cost things, we have to be doing our reports out of the same data that they're doing, because it's moving so fast, so quick, and there's so many variables coming into play. And I mentioned earlier that in a progressive design build, when you're trying to report to your commissions or your authorities and you're forecasting the job, well, you can have half your job bought out. You can be halfway through design, and half of it can still be just estimated cost, and you still have to give a forecasted cost on it. And that takes a different set of tools, because we're so used to saying, well, what's the lump sum price on that going to be?
Right.
Okay, good, that's the price of my contract. It's not that way here. There's still a lot of unknowns out there, but there's some that you do know. And so there are tools that we have to just communicate with people so that we reduce the fear, because when you put that all together, it can start to say, oh, that's just so messy. Well, it looks a little bit messy, but in that chaos is the creativity, and so we just have to add the structure to that in a way that that makes it less taxing on the brain to try to figure out how do we put all these loose pieces together. And there are ways of doing those types of things, and the industry has figured that out, and we've really made lean construction a big part of what we do, and it really attempts to put some, not rigidity, but structure around all these moving pieces so that we can consolidate things together into a way that we can make good decisions on them. And there are ways of doing that.
Well, thank you, Geoff. I appreciate this very much, and we're really glad to get some more details about progressive.
Super. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I think just design build as a whole, it's a really exciting time in our industry. You go back 10 years from now, and you look at where we are today, and there's just a want and a need to do this, because everybody's being asked to do more for less.
True that.
Here's the answer.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
To learn more about progressive design build, check out some of DBIA's resources online at dbia.org. Start with our Progressive Design Build Primer, and then you can also dig in with our new 3-part webinar, The Nuts and Bolts of Progressive Design Build. Of course, we've also got a large selection of progressive workshops at our March Design Build and Transportation and Wastewater conferences in Portland. So go to dbia.org for more on progressive design build.